Hiya, how you doing? Only 2 shapes left now, nothing to worry about at all. In this lesson, we're going to join the objects from the body and sculpt a bit of anatomy. Nothing too difficult, don't worry. Then we'll move on to the head, where we'll add a bit of volume to the cheeks. Then after remeshing, we'll do some of the more intricate details, like eyelid creases and the lips. And we'll just tidy up the nose a bit too. Oh yeah, and we're going to fix the ear that hasn't looked quite right since shape 2. So I'm going to start this in the same way we've started other tutorials, which is of course by changing the reference mesh to be the one that we're working from. And I'm just going to have a look at this. You can see what we need to do. Now it looks like all of this mesh is connected together, but it's not actually. If I just go to my overlays, turn on outline selected, you can see we actually have a torso section, which is the neck and the shoulders and everything, the head and the ears, and of course the eyeballs. Well, first of all, I'm just going to quickly fix these ears. Now, this is something you might have noticed already. I hadn't noticed this until during the week when I was looking at the work that I'd done, and I realised that this ear does not match this, like, even closely. I don't know where I've gone wrong there, but that's fine. It's not a difficult fix, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring my Shape 7 base mesh into my main 3D view, and I'll come into a top view, and it looks like I haven't rotated it quite enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into edit mode, and I'm going to press L to select this side and just delete that, so that I'm just working on this one side. Then I'll press L on this one, just rotate this into position. So I'm going to rotate it by, you can see in this top left corner here how much I'm rotating it by, roughly 18 degrees. And then I will also position it a little bit better. I'm just using this reference mesh to just get it into position. You know, I'm not that concerned that it doesn't match absolutely perfectly with the ears. I'm more concerned about the head, to be honest, but it would be nice to have it a little bit closer than it was. Okay, so that's that sorted. Let's turn this back off now. And then of course I need to mirror it, so I'll add a mirror modifier, which is there, and then just apply that. And then if I come into sculpt mode, I'll make sure symmetry is turned on. And yeah, that looks a lot better, a lot more like it should be. I feel like it does need a little bit of tweaking, but I am much happier with how that looks now. You could have told me it was wrong, you know. I've been working like that since shape 4. Anyway. So now let's look at what we actually need to do for shape 7. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is this lower half, okay, which is going to involve joining all these together, remeshing it, and just adding a little bit of anatomy. Nothing too difficult, don't worry about it. And then we'll move on to the head. And what we're going to do with the head is we're going to add a little bit of volume to those cheeks. Just push it a bit closer to what our final result's going to be. Then we're going to remesh it so that we can do the more intricate details, such as the eyelids and the lips. And we'll probably just tidy up that nose a little bit too. All right, let's do that then. So the first thing I'll do then is select the torso, and then I'll shift select everything under the head, and then I'll press Ctrl J to join them. And the reason why I select the torso first is now it retains the name torso, which is what I want. Okay. Then I'll press Ctrl 1 to add a subdivision surface. For the same reason we've done in previous tutorials, I'm going to remesh this in a minute, and I want the mesh to be smooth. And then I'll just apply that. So Ctrl Tab will go into sculpt mode, then I'll press Shift R to bring up our grid, and I want to set this to about, I don't know, 0.03, and then remesh. That looks about right. Now that might look quite low poly to you, but remember, we always want to be working at the lowest resolution we possibly can to achieve the shape we're trying to achieve at that time. And I can't stress this enough. The problem with going too high too early is, if you've ever suffered with a lumpy mesh, and I think we've all been through that at some point, the reason for that is generally because you've gone too high resolution too early. And the way you fix that is by bringing that back down. Be wary of tutorials that jump right up in resolution straight away, and there are some out there, I've seen them, because generally it's a bad idea. Some people can do it and get away with it, but generally speaking it's a bad habit to get into. Anyway, I think I've waffled on for long enough about why you should keep it low resolution. Let's look at what we've got here. So where these separate objects have connected, I just want to smooth those out a little bit. And for the boobies, I'll just do the top, because we actually want a crease under here, right? Okay, so something like that. I'll just jump into my front view. Now I'm going to add a bit of anatomy to this now. So I'm going to get my clear strips brush, and the first thing I'm going to add is the pit of the neck here, which is just going to be right where the neck meets the torso. So I'll just shrink this down a bit, check my strength, Put it to about, I don't know, 0.4. Hold control and just dig in here. Now, the reason we have a pit of the neck, well, there's a couple of reasons. First, we've got these clavicles here, your collarbones. They start sort of on either side. Let me just make a mark on this mesh so you can see. You don't want to put them right next to each other. You've actually got a finger's width between those there. And while we're on the clavicles, these end over here, sort of in the middle of your shoulder muscle, your deltoid. If you put your hand here, you'll feel a bony protrusion here, and that's where the clavicle ends, right here. This is called your acromion. However, this clavicle doesn't go straight backwards like this. You want to give it a nice curve, a nice S-curve like this. And then the shoulder muscles will like grab onto that. Now, another thing that forms the pit of the neck is a muscle that starts behind your ear, comes right down here, meets your clavicle, right where we've just marked it there. This is called your sternocleidomastoid. Now, the way I'm going to indicate this muscle is, well, first of all, I'm not going to make a stroke right up to the back of my ear like this, because you can't really see it up here anyway, unless you're turned in certain angles. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to make a little mark down the bottom like this and dig in near the middle like this. It's a little bit strong, so let me just turn that down. Just dig in like that and smooth it out. You can see how this is somewhat matching what we've got in the reference over here. That's all you need to do. Don't go crazy. Okay, I'm looking at this and I'm noticing she doesn't really have any traps, which is this muscle at the back here. So I'm just going to move that into position. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to give her huge traps. We just want an indication that there's something there. So something like that should be all right. I think we're looking all right there. Now, one last little bit of anatomy that I want to mention is your chest muscle, your pectoralis. It starts here at the middle where your sternum is and a little bit on your ribs. It sort of shoots underneath your deltoid, your shoulder muscle. Obviously, we don't have proper deltoids on this model, but what I'd like to do is just give an indication of this muscle just by doing this here. That's all, just create a shadow underneath there. And that just looks a little bit more natural. I'm happy with that. Just make a few tweaks to match the reference mesh. And job done. That's all we really need to do for this section. So let's move on to the head, shall we? For the head, what we want to do is create these sort of intricate details, the eyelids and these lips here. So for that, we need to add a bit of resolution. But if you remember, I also want to add a bit of fullness to these cheeks. When we started this head, I was aiming a bit more towards the skull, but as we get closer to the final result, we want to start pushing it closer to what the character actually looks like. And if you look at our reference mesh, you can see that we just have a bit more fullness in the cheeks. So before I add the resolution, I want to do that first, because if you remember, the more overall silhouette shapes we want to do while we've got a low resolution to avoid that lumpy mesh that we talked about. So let's do that first, shall we? So I'll jump into a front view. I'm just mainly looking at this line here and seeing that it matches up here. I can see that I need to pull this out a little bit, I think. Like that. Now, adding fullness to the cheeks, I think you'll probably find that coming to a top view is the most useful. Oh, sorry, not a top view, but, you know, just viewing it from above like this. You can see that these need pushing out a little bit, like that. And if I check this from a 3/4 as well, this is always going to be useful too. Something like that. Now, I don't want to lose this clear distinction between these planes, but I do just want to bring this out a little bit too. Just smooth that a bit. So I'm reasonably happy with that. Now, we will actually be able to tweak this further once we retopologize this, because what retopology gives us is subdivision levels. So when it's at the lowest subdivision level, we can make the bigger overall tweaks. And then when we want to edit the more finer details, we can just go up in subdivision levels and tweak that from there. But for the time being, this is how we want to work, okay? And I'm reasonably happy with how that's looking, I think. Let's just have a little scan around the model. So what we want to do now is add a bit of resolution. So I'm going to press Shift R to bring up our remesh grid. I'm going to set this to about 0.01, like that. Press Control R to remesh. And what I'll do is I'll just smooth over just to see how it behaves. And that feels like I've got the appropriate resolution now. So the first thing I'm going to do is the eyes. And what I want to do is just go over the work that we've done, because when you add resolution, you lose a little bit of information from before. But just to reiterate, this workflow is definitely quicker than going straight up into your high subdivision levels. You're just going to have to trust me on that. So I'll get my scrape brush. I'll just go over this eyelid just to plane that off a bit better. And then I'll get my draw sharp brush, holding control, and just sharpen that up a bit. And I'll do the same for the bottom as well. Sharpen that up. And I might even push this eyelid in a bit. Feels like it's drifting a little bit. Something like that. Check it over here. It looks a bit wobbly. Just smooth that. When we get round to doing shape 8, we'll fix a lot of this wobbliness out. That's what shape 8 is about, really, to be honest. Just refining all the work we've got down. Alright, so now with draw sharp still selected, I'm going to come up to stroke and turn on stabilize stroke, because I have a wobbly hand, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this eyelid crease here. Just by dragging like that. I need a bit more strength on that. And a steadier hand, judging by what I just did. Let's try that again. That looks okay. Alright, nice. Now I'll just smooth a little bit at the either end like that. Now the idea that you're trying to sell with this eyelid crease is that this top eyelid is going up inside it, and at the minute it doesn't look like it is. At this resolution you're going to have a hard time conveying that idea, to be honest. It's actually a lot easier once you've retopologized the mesh, so I'm not going to spend too much time working this. But just to illustrate what I mean, with my draw sharp brush, holding control, I'll just go over this stroke just above it like this. And you can kind of, if I come to a side view, you can kind of see what I mean, where it looks like this eyelid is now going up into that. If I just add a bit more. I hope that makes sense. Again, we don't really have the resolution to sell this idea, but once we do, that's what we're going to try and achieve. And I'll just smooth this up a little bit. I'm not going to smooth on the actual crease itself like this. I'm just going to smooth above it. Then I'll get my draw sharp and I'll just repeat this for the bottom eyelid. Feels a bit strong, that. Let's just turn it down a bit. Okay, something like that. And again, I'm going to smooth this, but not on the actual line itself, just underneath it. The area underneath, just make that transition a little bit smoother. And that's pretty much all you need to do with that for now, to be honest. I know it looks a bit smoother over here in the reference, but that's just because I've polished it a bit, you know, using your mesh filter. I'm not going to use this now, but sharpen. And just, that's how you get it to look a bit cleaner, but I don't want to do that just yet. In fact, you don't really need to do that at all. I've just done that so that it looks a bit cleaner for the reference. But really, cleaning all this up comes in shape 8. That's what shape 8's all about, really. So now, let's look at this nose then, shall we? So the nose, I'm just going to smooth this gently, just to remove a bit of those jagged edges. And I want to be careful not to lose my plane changes. I'm probably going to go over this in a minute with draw sharp. You can see that we've lost this crease a little bit. So let's bring out draw sharp and just go over that. Tuck that in. And then holding control, I'll just go over this. It's a bit heavy, that. I'll just go over where it changes from an upward facing plane to a downward. Check this from a side view, just make sure we've got the right sort of curvature going on. Just compare it to the grid at the background. I think it's looking okay. We just need some lips now, don't we? Yeah, there's really not much we need to do with the nose, to be honest. Let's just make this a bit neater. From a bottom view, you want it so that it's got a bit of curvature. It kind of follows the curvature of the mouth. If you remember, the mouth has like a barrel shape to it, if you're looking at it from underneath or above. Alright, so I'm happy with that now, so let's move on to the mouth. So again, the first thing I'm going to do is just go over what we've already done. I'll get my draw sharp and mark out the corners of the mouth. Turn off stabilize stroke. Redo that. Then going down and curve up like that. So we've got our centre line there. So the main ideas that you want to sell with the lips is, first of all, the top lip sits on top of the bottom lip, and so the top lip tends to be further forward than the bottom lip. And also the top lip is a downward facing plane, whereas the bottom lip is an upward facing plane. So just to show you what I mean, if I make a mark for the top lip, so I've got my draw sharp, I'm holding control, and I want the top of the top lip to be around here. Okay, so I've just made a little mark. This is going to come down to here, the corner of the mouth. Let's just turn the strength up. And I want it to tuck into this corner as well. So I'm going to go like this. No, I'm not holding control. I'm just tucking it into that corner, if that makes sense. Like that. Okay, and then just go over this a couple of times. Oops, looks like I made a bit of a mistake there. I'll just smooth that out. And I'll just reshape this a bit better too. If I look at my side view, you can see that in order to make this a downward facing plane, the top of it needs to be further forward than the bottom, which it currently is. So all we need to do is create this transition from top to bottom as smooth as we can. If you look in the reference, it's pretty much a flat plane. Now, real lips obviously don't look like that, and you can add more realism after you've done this stage. I might not bother with this stylized model. I quite like the look of it. And again, it's another thing I find easier to do once the model is retopologized anyway. But enough waffle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get my clay strips. I'm just going to start building up this lip like that. And I want you to keep an eye on this side view over here so you can see what I mean. So near the top of the lip, I'm going to be building up. And towards the middle, I'm going to be carving away. And then I'll smooth in between the two. Let me just get my draw sharp and re-emphasize this midline a bit. And what you'll start to see is that this turns into a nice downward facing plane. Okay, I wouldn't mind a 3/4 view while I'm doing this as well. So something like that. Can I even just get the grab brush and pull this forwards just to emphasize that plane. Alright, so that's our top lip. Now let's repeat that for the bottom. So I'll get my draw sharp, and the first mark I'm going to make is just this area underneath the bottom lip. You can see it over here in the reference. I just want to make that mark first, which I think will be around about here. But with that there, I'm just going to smooth towards the chin like that. Just give it a bit of a smoother transition. And you can pretty much see where that bottom lip is just with that one mark. So with draw sharp still selected, I'll hold control. I'll just mark the most forward point of this bottom lip like that. I don't want to go all the way to the sides though, because it actually gets a bit soft around here. Alright, just emphasize that a bit more. By making this mark underneath the bottom lip as well, we're leaving space for these pillars on the side of the lips too. If I get my clay strips brush, we can just build those up a little bit. You can see what I mean. Alright, nice. So now with the bottom lip, we want to create an upward facing plane. So much like we did with the top lip, we want to push in near the centre and then pull out near the bottom of it. Again, looking at my side and 3/4 views while I do this. I'm probably going to go over that centre line again. We're losing it a little bit. Thing is, when you're doing this, you're trying to pull the topology in a few different ways and it doesn't know what to do. So let's just smooth that out. Smooth out that topology like that. Then get draw sharp. Mark the corners. And then go over that centre line again like this. And you can see how our lips are doing what we want them to do. Now it would be nice if we had a lip to the top lip. So what I mean by that, we want like a little ledge just above it. So let me just re-emphasize the top of it. And then just above the top, not holding control, I'll just dig in with draw sharp like that. And again, I'll smooth the outside of that mark we just made, like so. And I'm quite happy with that. We'll just tweak the shape a little bit with the move brush. In fact, I might just give it a little remesh actually, just to reset that topology a bit, and then just go over these marks that we've just made. And hopefully you've noticed as well that I wasn't lying at the start when you just use a few brushes over and over again. I'm really only using grab, clay strips, draw sharp, occasionally scrape. And that's pretty much it. I'm not using much else. Of course I do occasionally use other ones, but for the majority of the time it's just these. Right, I'm quite Quite happy with that. I think we can move on to shape 8 now. That's shape 7 in the bag. We're practically home and dry now with just one shape left to go. Now, I know shape 7 is probably a bit trickier than the others before it, but keep doing those exercises and you'll get it. It might take quite a few attempts, but you'll get there. And don't worry about shape 8. Shape 8 is just about refining what we've already done. You'll walk it.